even know if this is our intro music. This came on the podcast machine that I got. Is this a stock noise or someone else's? I don't know. We'll find out.
Stephen R. Covey once said, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." We have something to say worth listening to. This is Real Talk. Real Talk. The podcast. Telling the story and lessons learned of industry leaders, entrepreneurs, professional athletes, and the movers and shakers of the business world. Have you been told no? Have you been told that you can't do it? Have you been told that you'll never get to the next level? That noise. Yeah, we said it. We're telling you you can do it, and you can get to the next level. If others have done it, so can you. Real Talk. This is Real Talk, the podcast. And this is your host, Mason.
Yo, what is going on, everybody? It is Mason coming back at you with another episode of Real Talk. Our guest today knows what it means to be on top, both in life and in search rankings. After beating a $1 billion company with his SEO skills, he has gone on to write for Forbes. He's the author of the book Outranked and currently runs his own company, SEO National, which he founded in 2007. Ladies and gentlemen, Damon Burton. Damon, how you doing today?
What's up, Mason? Better than you, because I got AC.
We were talking right before this. I was like, hey, man, if I'm sweating bullets, I might be nervous, or I don't have air conditioning and it's Las Vegas and it's 115 degrees outside. So.
Dude, that's rough.
Hey, it's okay,
Well,
man.
we'll try and make it work. We'll try and make this conversation worth you sweating off a few pounds.
Good. So no excuses on your end, then, if you know.
Yeah.
I'm putting everything on you now.
Okay, I can take it.
So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and kind of where you're at right now in your journey.
So Damon Burton founded a company called SEO National in 2007 and just stayed in the lane of SEO. Never wanted to be an agency owner that says they do it all and is mediocre at all of it. So we just stick to search engine optimization. Also been married for here in 2 months, it'll be 15 years. And then we have 3 kids. So my excuse, if I don't deliver, I'm going to deliver, but in case there's like a circus that comes flying in, it's because I have 3 kids and the 3 kids all have friends over. So
nice.
There you go.
Hey, we wouldn't have it any other way, man. So I liked one quick thing that you said is that you didn't want to offer like a huge plethora of services and be okay at everything. You wanted to be just really focused on one aspect of it, which is SEO. Tell us a little bit about why you have that mindset of why you want to be the best at one thing instead of kind of good at other things, and what kind of results that sort of yielded for you.
Well, I could probably answer it why I started that way, and then answer it why I've stuck to that way. So, when I got into it, to give you a little bit of background, so when I first started the company, I was just a solopreneur, and my background was originally design, and then I had some of our design clients. I had one particularly who's still a client today, 14 years later, that said, like, hey, what do you know about Google? And I said, I know enough that I can probably help, but I don't know enough that I feel confident charging you, but I also don't want to work for free. So what we did is I said, I will work for free in the beginning, but if we hit these mutually agreed upon goals, then you owe me retroactively, and we start a retainer moving forward. So that way I'm incentivized, but if I don't pull through, then they don't lose anything either. So I put all the responsibility and the weight on my shoulders, which I was totally fine with, and we hit those goals. I think we had like a 3-month goal, and we hit it in 6 weeks. And then I went in and rolled that out to like a second client who's also still a client 14 years later, and had some more success. And very clearly at that point I said, okay, I like SEO. And then that kind of that phrase I gave you where I didn't want to be an agency that offered a bunch of things and is mediocre at all of it. So very specifically at that point, I said I'm going to do SEO. Now, I think why I've stuck to it over the years is a couple reasons. One, SEO's kept my attention. And for I assume most of the listeners are familiar with SEO, but if not, what it stands for is search engine optimization. And the goal of SEO is to show up higher on search engines for words you can monetize, but without paying for ads. And so we had, I think why I've stayed in it is there's this nice balance for me where it's like, hey, there's enough consistency in it that I know what I'm walking into every day. I'm working on the same objectives every day, but there's also enough deviation and sexiness and things that change to keep my interest, because there's a little bit of evolution to how algorithms work day after day, year after year. So it's like a nice balance of consistency, but diversified, whatever. Like I get to go in and there's always like a wild card from day to day. So that's kept my attention. But probably the last answer of why I've stayed in it is that's funny that we're talking about this, because just a client right before we jumped on and hit record, we were Skyping back and forth, and he's got a bunch of different businesses, super successful guy, but he's got like 10 projects going on. And then I talked to other of my friends who are successful entrepreneurs, and they're at the same level, or a lot of them are higher, one step ahead of even where I'm at. And we talk about, I say, hey, that's cool, you're doing so many things. Congratulations on all their successes. I've thought about doing that. There's all these other things that get my attention, but I just don't want to dilute my effort. Like, for the most part, it's saving my mental sanity. I just want to protect my mental bandwidth. And so when I talk to that, can I swear? Am I swearing on this one?
Sure, I don't give a shit.
So all right, I'm going to save it, because now it wouldn't be right if I dropped it. So every person I talk to says, don't do it. Every single entrepreneur friend that I have that's found success, they say, don't do it. It's just too much. They're not saying they're not successful in those extra things, but is it worth it? Like, is it worth going from, I don't know, making up numbers here, 2 million to 3 million a year and having a mental breakdown? Like, you're pretty fucking good at $2 million, right? Like, there's not too many more things that you're going to do that are really going to bring tangible happiness. And so all these other guys are like, it's just not worth it, even though on paper they have every bragging right possible.
If it makes you feel any better, I've got like an electronics store, a podcast, a trading card store, I sell office furniture. I'm one of these guys too, and I 100% agree with them. Like I just like, the problem is like I fall down these rabbit holes, and they'll probably tell you like it gets started as like, I'm not going to be that involved, or it'll be and then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, here we are, project number 7,
another thing,
and I'm just like, does it really add to like my happiness? Like, cool, like you said, on paper it's like sweet, but like it's not like I can like I went from like a comfortable life to living on a jet kind of thing, Yeah. Like I said, the level of increase is very marginal.
Yeah.
So I agree. Stay in your lane and like be happy with it, and double down on yourself and like what you're doing, because your brain will go crazy.
Yeah. For me at this point, it's a total sanity play, just protecting that mental bandwidth. And I think I say no. We all know, like, say no. It's important to say no. But for me, it's like, that is my daily obligation, is like to protect as much of my availability, my sanity, and my family's sanity as possible. So I say no. It's like a catch-22, right? Because you want to say yes to new things and new experiences, but what you have to figure out is like, who are you? Like, what makes you happy? And then say yes to those wild things that can support that happiness. Say no to absolutely everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say yes to everything. Like, you'll go crazy, and we've all done it at certain points in our lives, and probably, and you get stretched too thin, and it happens. But on top of everything, like, you've got 3 kids and a wife. Like, I couldn't imagine you like taking on more and more workload, again, to protect your sanity. I'm sure you're stretched pretty thin with 3 kids as it is. So tell us a little bit how it is, like, balancing your family life and your business life, because you've had a business for a long time, and sounds like you've had a family for a decent amount of time. So.
Yeah, but about the same time. So I started the business and got married within about 6 months of each other. So my wife and I, we had been dating for a year, and then we're engaged for a year, and then we got married, and we waited 5 years before we had kids. And so during that 5 years, I was very proactive about like, okay, grind it out now as much as possible, because kids are definitely coming at some point. And so I figured, like, make as many of the sacrifices now so that I can have the freedoms later. And that's not to say that I don't still wake up early today and do whatever I can to grind it out where I can. But like, I have very hard boundaries. So for the most part, I try and call it a day at 5 o'clock. I almost never work on weekends anymore. I never give clients my cell phone. I don't have Facebook Messenger on my phone. I don't have email on my phone. Our office line auto attendant shut off at 5 o'clock. Like, you cannot get a hold of us after 5 or on the weekends.
Does it drive you crazy ever, like not having access to like your email or like stuff like that? Or
No.
have you learned to just turn it off?
No.
I would have this like FOMO of like, you know, just, I'm like,
total opposite.
Okay.
When I know I have to go check emails, I'm like, shit, better make it worth it. Like, I make sure that's like, I batch it. Like, that's my time to go into it.
Okay.
Because here's why I don't have it is, you know, if you go search Damon Burton Forbes, the first article they wrote for Forbes was on this. The title was something like "Constant connectivity does not equal productivity." And so I listed like these 5 or so things I don't have, like email on my phone, Facebook Messenger. And so I'll tell you when this happened. There's a very specific moment why I embraced this. And so it was one of the last gentlemen that I worked for before I started my own business. So this was like 17 years ago. So because I worked for him, quit, and then worked for another gentleman in between, and then I started my business 14 years ago. So about 17 years ago, I was at dinner with my wife, and it was like a Friday, and 7 o'clock at night, and my boss sent me a text, and I didn't answer because it's fucking Friday, and it's after hours, and I'm at dinner with my wife.
Sure.
And so then he emailed me, and I had email on my phone at the time, and so this is pre-smartphone. This is like the almost smartphone. So if you remember the T-Mobile Sidekicks, the little flip screen phone.
Oh, legendary, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So I had email on that, and then he hits me up on email like 10 minutes later, and I didn't answer. And so because I didn't reply to those, then he calls me. And so I took the call, and it was, you know, something that could have totally waited until after the weekend. I didn't go take action that night, but, you know, for him being an OCD entrepreneur, like, he was a super successful guy, but just really toxic to work for. And so at that moment, literally at the dinner table, I deleted the email app off my phone and have never had it back on since. And so wow. Do I fear what I'm missing out? No. Have I missed business out of it? Not that I'm aware of. But the type of people that want me available 24/7 are not the people I want to do business with anyways. And as of the time we're recording this, the post I made today on LinkedIn was exactly about this. It was, I haven't fired a client in a while. Here's a record, 2 weeks. And so we had this new client. And so I set here's why it works. It's only weird if you make it weird. It works if you set expectations. So in the pre-sale, like in the lead call, we talk about availability. When we're send the agreement, it's in the contract. And after this guy that I fired, that I'll tell you a story in a minute, after this guy, I took it to the next level. So we already had it in a paragraph that specifically says availability, and we're not available on weekends, and we're not available on holidays, and, you know, email and scheduling is our preferred method of communication, and minimize same day requests. And so this guy just kept politely nudging that, and he wasn't doing it to be malicious. I think that he's just used to that, which a lot of people are, is they can just push the boundaries, and once you give an inch, then they're going to see how far they can take it, and it's going to be harder for you to push back because you allowed it before. So I have like non-negotiables for me, right? And so I reminded the guy, like, hey, we're not available at this point, and it's in the queue. This isn't anything urgent. We'll get to it tomorrow. And then he kept nudging those things, and then he sent something over the 4th of July weekend. So the 4th of July this year was on a Sunday. He emailed me on Saturday, which I didn't get till Monday because I don't check my emails over the weekend. And so, you know, one business day out, I replied to him, and he had got so impatient in between sending that email on Saturday that he followed up again Monday morning, like, hey, it kills me. His words literally said, it kills me something. Like, it kills me that I have to wait a couple days to get a reply. My reply was, hey, it's done. I've closed out the invoice. Thanks for the opportunity to work with you. Like, we're done. And you don't have to be weird about it. Like, I mean, that's not the exact verbiage I used. I was polite about it. But now he's backtracking. Now he's saying, crap, I realized I stepped on toes. I stepped over the boundaries. The value that you provide was not dependent on you answering my emails within 35 seconds. And so the type of people we miss business on, I don't want it anyway.
No, that's, I think that's a really important kind of thing to take note of. Now, will you ever take a client back such as like this guy. If this guy's like, hey man, I'm real subtle.
I don't think this guy will change, so I don't know on this guy. But we have had one client that has left and come back 3 times. And every time I remind them of the obligations and I increase the price. So if they want to commit to, the arrangements and follow through on it, then that's fine. But if they're going to continue to push boundaries, then no.
We still there?
You're back.
Sorry, I unplugged something.
I saw you messing with the mic.
I was like, oh no.
No, you're good.
Okay,
so yeah,
sorry.
I mean, it depends on who they are. I think that I'm pretty good. Once you've been in this long enough, you develop a sixth sense where you can kind of identify the type of personality the person is within the first couple seconds of talking to them. So I proactively disengage from those opportunities pretty quickly, and so I don't run into this circumstance too often anymore. The guy that I recently fired was supposed to be just like a short-term engagement, and I knew that he was a little antsy. He was nice, but he was antsy, and so I thought, okay, this will be tolerable since it's just a short-term engagement. But even then, it was just too much.
You can tell too, kind of like by the level of like just calmness and rationale that you have, that you are like so seasoned and veteran in this. Tell us like how you got all this, this wealth of knowledge and experience, and tell us how you got started. Tell us how you beat the $1 billion company. I want to hear that story.
So the $1 billion company it's a funny story. So this was in my company's infant years. It might have even been the year before I formally started the business. It was around, I want to say it was around 2005, 2006. The way that we can timestamp this for the listeners, if you go Google The Bachelor Andy Baldwin. So my wife was watching, The Bachelor, and back then she'd loop me in on the season finale, like, hey, come watch this with me. And so I went and watched this with my wife. And from what I remember from the other season finales was, it's like, hey, the end, come back in a couple weeks to see who the new guy is. Well, this time it was, I don't know who the guy before Andy Baldwin was, but it was like, hey, this guy's gone, but stay tuned. Up next, we're going to tell you who the next Bachelor is. So this year, they did something different. They told you who the Bachelor was going to be in the upcoming season. And so that piqued my curiosity, like why they did that. I knew it was a marketing play, but I didn't know what the play was. And so I went into the other room. At the time, I had some old crappy computer in the other guest room. And so I said, hey, I'll be right back. And so I went in and searched this guy's name, and I couldn't find hardly anything about him. I couldn't even find like an official ABC The Bachelor kind of thing about him. And all I could find was like a couple crappy blogs and like a dozen pictures from miscellaneous sites. So I made a fan site called andybaldwin.net. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to be in here and I'm going to give me an hour. I'm just going to throw together whatever I can real quick. And so I threw together this website, and right on it says the unofficial Andy Baldwin fan site. And this was in my infant SEO years. And so I did everything I knew that I could do to optimize the website at that point. And then I organized the content. I organized the biography information that I could find about him. I organized pictures about him, because to me, what was going on was I don't know anything about this guy, and personally, I don't really care. But if I'm already spending the time to research this, just imagine the people that do care. And so I was trying to solve a problem I was trying to come up with a solution for a problem. And so I built this website, and because I didn't have anything that was unique on it. The pictures I found and credited to other websites. The information was public information, but I created a solution that was intuitive. It was user-friendly. The fans could find what they want, which was hunky pictures of this dude, and to figure out what his background was. And so within a couple days, that site was just crushing it. And so it outranked ABC's Bachelor site for that season. And then the next season, I did the same thing. There was another gentleman named Brad Womack. And so I built a website around Brad Womack. But by then, I think ABC got a little bit smarter, because they started proactively buying the domains and proactively building up profiles for their bachelors and releasing them as soon as the information went public, and other people started getting on the bandwagon of like building out these fan sites. But it supported the concept that still stands today, is like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to provide a better solution to whatever the market's demanding.
Yeah, no, that's funny, man. It's funny too that it was The Bachelor of all the shows. It just shows you it's like you're like, hey, I'm not I'm not like a diehard Bachelor like fan, but like look what I did with a concept. Like is there any more like concrete proof of concept than some dude who's totally not in The Bachelor making a Bachelor fan website, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about the show other than it was a show about, a dating reality show, and that my wife watched it. So, I didn't know who the host was or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it's, that was just free money for months because they just threw ads up on it. And it was just such a simple concept, was just a good user experience with organized content.
So you were basically like building like a Wikipedia page basically before there was a Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, I suppose that's comparable.
So what were your next kind of ventures after that? Like when you were like, hey, I got something here. How do I take this concept of this Bachelor thing and run with it and build a business out of it?
Well, this kind of supports like how I got into this whole world. So around this time, in the years prior to even the Bachelor thing, the way that I first got into digital marketing is it goes back way far. Like, I mean, I could probably say this even goes back as far as when I was 6, 7, 8 years old and on a typewriter. So when typewriters were cool before computers, my family didn't even have a typewriter. And so then when computers came along, it was something, so I grew up lower middle class, and it wasn't, there's no sob story there. It's just the reality of what it was. But I always knew that I wouldn't have access to like any sort of modern computer to use. And so I'd always take advantage of even typing class. I remember in junior high, I just loved going to typing class because I got access to a computer. And then I took that to, ninth grade, and because I typed so well, they did like some sort of special class for, quote unquote computer savvy students, where we got to design the school lunch menu. And so then in that class, I first got exposed to the internet, and it was a text only browser, no images, no design. And it was called Gopher. So Gopher was just this text based browser. So you'd basically FTP and connect into websites. And then it was just text. That was it. And so I thought that was interesting that you could connect virtually. And so the same thing kind of continued, got in high school. And then with the experience that I had, they came up with the first HTML class. So this is before WordPress, this is before Dreamweaver, this is before all those things. And so I got to learn HTML by hand, which is still awesome to this day, because these website builders and applications don't know if something looks ugly. They just do what you tell it to do when you push the button. So knowing how to manually override things with HTML is still valuable 20-something years later. So then where I started to get into really digital marketing in this evolutionary journey is when I went into college. I was taking a communications class, and the professor said, hey, we're going to do an HTML project. Here's the minimum requirements, build it on the school server. And I got thinking about how much time I was going to put into this, knowing that it would just be deleted off the school server at the end of the semester. And so I asked the professor, I said, can I, still meet all these requirements, but can I buy a domain, and can I build an actual website that I want to keep? And he said, yeah, as long as we can access it, that's fine. So I built the website eliterides.com. So I still own the domain. There's nothing, I've archived everything there, so there's nothing there to go to it. But what that was a car enthusiast website. So when I was in my early 20s, I was big into, the Turbo Honda Civics and things like that. So when I started that, what had happened was a couple unique things. One is the website started to get views. And so then as it got more traffic, I said, oh, how do I make this better? How do I improve my design skills? So I got in more into design. And then as the traffic increased, I said, how do I monetize this? So that's how I got into understanding, affiliate ads and paid ads and the core concepts of SEO. So that's where things kind of evolved. And then that same year, about 6 months after I built the site, Fast and Furious came out. Nobody knew what Fast and Furious was then. Nobody knew it was even a thing. And so that just added to the traffic of the website, because I already had an established community around that type of, fan appreciation. So that's how I got into it. And then to kind of fast track to where we're at today, I was the kid that did crappy websites on the side for friends and family for years, like we all know. And then I got enough experience that I got decent at it. And then I started taking a couple paid side projects. And then where I went all in was I had an opportunity to say, okay, The day job is taking 80% of my time, but it's only providing about 50% of my income. So it would suck to lose that 50%, but I could free up 80% of my time. And so when I got to the point where I could still pay my bills, which at the time it was just me and my wife, so it was a mortgage and a car payment and food. That was about it. So at the time that I could pay those with little to no disposable income beyond that, I felt that was as good as a safety net as I was going to get, as good as a calculated risk as I would get, especially knowing that we'd want to have kids in the near future. And so at that point, I went all in on being self-employed, freed up 80% of the time, was able to make that missing 50% of the income back in, I don't know, it's like 2 or 3 months. And then since then, it's just continued to scale. Now I have 33 employees. We work with Inc. 5000 featured businesses, Shark Tank featured businesses, NBA teams. So that's a crash course. A lot of blips on that radar. So where do you want to take it from here?
Wow, gee, I didn't realize you had so many employees. I was going to ask you if you were a one-man show or if you've built out since then. So do you guys have office spaces? Is it virtual? How do you manage everyone?
It's always been remote. A couple of years ago, we bought an office. I had one employee, so I'm in Utah. At the time, I had one employee in Utah, and that was it. So I was window shopping commercial space just out of curiosity, just to see if having a physical footprint would increase local business. And so I found an office. Ended up being cheaper to buy it than to rent it. So I bought this office, and then I worked out of it for about a year. And it brought enough business to pay the mortgage on the building, but not enough business for me to care to go there. And so it didn't have my attention. And so I ended up renting it out for about 2 years, and then I sold it the year before COVID happened. So like, talk about good timing. So I don't have the property anymore. But other than that, like, it was only me and one employee there at the max. But other than that, the team's always been remote. Last year, right as COVID happened, which is like a whole other story in itself, I went to the Philippines because half my team is in the US and half my team's in the Philippines. And I went to the Philippines to meet I had 6 employees in the Philippines at the time. Other than those 6, I've never met any of the other 33 employees. And so we've always been remote since day one. Marco is who's been with me the longest. He's been with me for 12 years. The first year or two, I was just self-employed, solopreneur. And now I've been on a hiring spree this year because at the beginning of 2021, we had 14, 15 employees. Then by March, we got up to 20. And in March alone, I hired 10, went from 20 to 30. And then since then, I've had 3 more. And now out of those hires, now I have, I think, 3 people in Utah. So now I'm feeling kind of obligated that I need to get together with at least 3 more of them.
So, like, how do you find these people? Is it like independent contractors? Like, these guys like clock in every day? How does that whole? Are they virtual assistants? How does that whole thing work?
Technically, I suppose they're considered contractors, but no, they're full-time employees. They work for only me. Now, how do I find them? A lot of the U.S. talent was referrals because on the U.S. side, it's mostly copywriting and quality control. And so Stacy's my content manager, and she actually started as a client, and she's still a client. So she's a client and an employee. And
nice.
She was impressed with the processes, and she had an opportunity. Her husband's this high-ranking gentleman in the military, and so she's always moving around. And so she had an opportunity and an interest in like a flexible remote position, and so that's how that evolved. And so since Stacy's been with us for so long, whether as a client or an employee, she's really familiar with the processes now. So she's really good at understanding what we need. And so she's good at filling the gaps on our copywriters and quality control teams. Now, like the overseas team I'm actually very strategic about how I post these job listings. So I'll just post it on a job board. But what I do is I like stack it, right? Like almost like a sandwich. So there's something at the top and the bottom, and then a little Easter egg in the middle. So when I do these job postings, at the beginning I say, hey, established marketing company, we're awesome and so are you. We understand remote team management. We pay your Filipino holidays. Like you try to resonate with them, right? Like why should they be interested to continue reading? But then I skip down to the bottom and I put the compensation, like here's your pay. You had asked about, do they clock in or clock out? No, I don't care what days they work. I don't care what hours they work. The last thing I want to do is micromanage. And we can talk about when we tested time management software here in a minute, but no, they're on their own. So then in the middle, I put an Easter egg. I put, don't message me on this board. Instead, Skype me. And when you Skype me, you must copy and paste, I love Tyrannosaurus Rex cheeseburgers. Like just something bizarre that nobody would ever type in a normal engagement. Because what's going on is people scan these job listings, right? So they go, what's in it for me? So they look at the top and they look at the bottom. And I care about A, who can read documentation thoroughly, and B, who can follow directions. So I'm filtering out 80% of the people without even having to try. So I get these private messages and I just ignore them. When I first started this process, every once in a while I'd look at them and I'd be like, ooh, shiny resume, like let's look anyway. And it never works out. So I don't even look at them anymore. And then if they do Skype me, but they don't tell me about how much they love T-Rex cheeseburgers, then I don't accept it and I don't reply.
Follow the directions, man.
Yeah.
No, I do the same thing with interviews. It's so weird how I'll like hide little stuff, or I'll make them bring certain things, or I'll say certain things, and then during the interview I'll ask them if they don't know like what I put in the job posting. Like, wow, you didn't read. Like I put before, like, hey, I have a dog. Her name is Abby. On there, and I've like literally asked people about, like, just because it's so weird that you would put that like randomly on a job posting, you would remember that. Or even someone would be like, oh crap, that was on there. Sometimes people are like, I got no idea. How would I know that? And I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
no worries.
You're out. Kind of off topic, but there was a lady that was in the news. It was probably 10 years ago. I want to say she got like 10 grand because she read the terms on the back of her credit card thing in the small detail. And it was like, if you fucking read this, go to this website and you got 10 grand. And like, nobody did it.
Yep.
Except for this lady.
Yep. So what were you saying about you guys tested some time management software?
Yeah, so we did at one of the points when we were scaling and I was delegating some responsibilities to another team member. I said, hey, I'm open to ideas. What do you think we can do to be more productive? And one of the things was like, hey, let's do a time management software. And I was like, well, I don't particularly care about it, but if it can contribute, then sure. And so we went through and tested like all these different time management software. And there was largely two problems for me. One is it felt intrusive. I felt like probably even beyond intrusive, because like some of these would take like a little screen grab every 30 seconds to make sure they're being productive and not on Facebook and whatever. And so for me, I think beyond the obvious part of that being intrusive was that I felt like I was forcing a lack of trust in the relationship. Like I was forecasting that this was not going to work. Because if I trust them, why would I care? Why would I want to spot check them? And so for me, it's like I either trust you or I don't. And I even tell them during the onboarding, like once they're in, I'm like, look, here's how this works. I don't want to micromanage. I've done everything that you've done. So I can tell by, the amount of time I'm paying you for the work you produced, if you're actually doing this or not. Beyond that, just do your job. And so what happened was, A, it was awkward for me as a leader, but B, I was spending more time fixing the stupid clock ins and clock outs than the time they were saving, because every day I'd wake up like to a Skype like, hey Damon, I forgot to clock out yesterday and now my hours show 18 hours for Tuesday. Can you fix that? So I'm having to log in and change this hour. Or hey, I forgot to clock in at all and now I just clocked in when I meant to clock out. And I was just wasting so much time about something that I didn't even care to begin with.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's because what you're not doing, or because of what you're doing, it's not like shift work. It just, I don't even think that it would make sense on your end to clock people in and out, right?
Yeah, I mean, all I do is for their log, it's super simple. They just have a spreadsheet, and it's like, here's the date, here's a little blip on what I worked on, and here's how many hours. Like, that's it. All I want to do is go, oh yeah, that's our current priorities. For me, it's more to see how we're allocating our time than to really like check them on their hours spent. I'll just look at it and go, okay, yeah, that's reasonable. But for me, it's more of an overview of like, what did we do that week to understand if we're prioritizing correctly.
Yeah, and it always amazes me of like how simple of solutions people come up with for like kind of complex problems. Like time management is a complex problem, but you're like, I got this spreadsheet, I can eyeball it down, I can look over it real quick, and it works. Like it's
3 columns, that's it.
And right. And you don't need this like $10,000 software. I swear, every time I hire somebody, they're like, all right, so we got to get this special software and this special. I'm like, no, we don't. Like, I've been doing this long enough. Like, I can look at something and just be like, that's about right, or that's good enough. Like, as perfection is the enemy of success.
Totally. Yeah, perfection is the enemy of done.
Yeah. There's no better way to say it. So tell us, kind of like looking back, from where you're at right now, what are a couple like big focus points that you feel like that you've really grown from, in terms of like why you're so successful?
One would be where we talked about like staying in your lane and having clear boundaries. You're able to be more productive when you know what you want to focus on, and then you actually give yourself the freedom to focus on only that thing. So we've kind of talked about that, so I won't dig too much deeper on that. But one of the other things is, about 7 or 8 years ago, I got invited to go to a meeting with some venture capital investors. And so what was going on is I had a friend who had built and sold 5 businesses in 10 years. He just sold his 6th for a ridiculous amount of money. And so he invited, the 6th one he just sold is the one that started at the beginning of this story. So what had happened is he was starting this other agency, and he said, hey, we're going to do some digital marketing. We have some investors, but they want to take multiple small agencies and combine them into a bigger one and fund the bigger one, because then they want to like take it public and then exit. And so I went to this VC meeting. He said, just come listen. All right. Cause I wasn't like looking to sell or anything, but he goes, just come listen and see if there's any opportunity. So I went and listened, and I learned a lot. I quickly didn't proceed any further with any negotiations because it just didn't feel right. But what I took away positively from that meeting was that I learned that if you ever want to exit a business, buyers want 2 things. One is they want to know where the fire is so they can pour more fuel on it. Where are your sales coming from so they can accelerate it? And the other thing is they want to take the keys and run. And so to take the keys and run, you have to have documented processes. So that was a huge part of the evolution of the company, because when I understood, we all hear it, like SOPs, standard operating procedures, document your processes, but until you actually do it, you can't quantify the value. I mean, I just had a podcast just like 3-4 days ago with a gentleman I did a podcast a long time ago with, and on the first one years ago, I talked about the importance of documenting processes, because when you get to the point where you have to scale, eventually you have to pass that on to some of those responsibilities to somebody. And when we did the follow-up one, like one of the first things he said is he just started laughing. He's like, dude, I feel it. I'm hurting because now we need it. And I didn't do it the first time. And I knew what you're saying, but I couldn't fully appreciate it until now. And now it's too late. Now we have growing pains. So what I took away from that VC meeting was, document your processes. And what really accelerated me embracing that is I was also listening to 2 books. I was listening to 4 Hour Workweek and then E-Myth Revisited. And so what I learned from those 2 books is, like, 4 Hour Workweek is a great book, but I'd already kind of knew the majority of the concepts. I didn't really take away like anything mind-blowing from it. But the one thing that I took away was, like, why don't I have more team members? Why am I not delegating more stuff? And so at the time I had 3 remote employees, and then I went to like 7 or 8 within 6 weeks. But then the way I was able to do that is because I started documenting processes. So we had processes, but like some were on a spreadsheet and some were on a Word doc and some were in my head. And so it was kind of like a puzzle. We had all the puzzle pieces, but sometimes it was harder to find which one was where. And so what I learned from listening to those 2 books at the same time is E-Myth Revisited is basically about make your business dependent on processes and not people. Because when people leave, their talent leaves. But if you have it built on processes, then the people are interchangeable, because you can introduce them to the documentation. And so if any of the listeners are going to go listen to those 2 books, listen to E-Myth first, because 4 Hour Workweek teaches you how to cut corners, but you don't want to start cutting corners until you know what corners you are cutting. So you need to define your processes first. So that was like a huge moment for us. And it took a long time to fully document them. It took 2 or 3 hours every other day for like a year, just because we have so many different paths that our fulfillment can go down. You know, is it a commerce site or non-commerce site, or are they on this host or that host, this platform or that platform? So we had a lot of deviations in where we could go in our fulfillment. So why it took so long is I didn't want to half-ass it. Other than updating this as needed, I never wanted to do this again. And so I was going to give it my best effort no matter how long it took. And so what you have to realize is your team will be as good or as bad as your documentation. And they will find gaps in that documentation. You're not going to do it intentionally, but because we're human beings, we're going to go for the path of least resistance. And so they're going to expose any tiny gaps. So I made the most granular documentation possible. So in all of our, in our project management system, it's like, here's the type of task. So are we optimizing a commerce or a non-commerce website? Is it on this platform or that platform? And then you drill down, and depending on which one that is, I can just launch a whole sequence of 200 tasks that are granulated down to the tiniest detail instantly. 200 tasks in 20 seconds. And it's going to delegate it to the appropriate team member. It's going to set the appropriate due date. It's going to set the appropriate task dependencies. And that was the shittiest thing ever to build out, but it is the most amazing thing now because it supports infinite scalability now. I can just find, vet the talent. Day 1 is welcome to the team. Day 2, here's our CRM, and day 3 is goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, all of that, like, I agree with just like a bajillion %. I think anyone who's worked at a place that has poor training, you kind of know, like you feel lost for so long. And then if you ever go work for somewhere that has amazing training, you're like, oh my gosh, like everyone knows what they're doing. Like I have a lane to go into. I have, documentation to refer to. Like it is night and day. Cause what I see a lot in small businesses is like, hey, go follow around this person, go shadow this person, or, like you said, a lot of the processes were in your head, right? So like a lot of people be like, well, how do I do this? And you kind of explain it to them. People get frustrated because they now don't understand the process that's in your head. So and
you're spending twice as long. You hire the person to save you time, and now you're both working on the same thing.
Yeah, you're sitting next to them, like showing them how to do it. And you're like, I've done this 1,000 times. So I actually went down. I did this for my electronics store probably 4 years ago in a binder. And then about 2 years ago, I switched it over and went digital. And in terms of training, it's amazing, and it's great too. If anyone's ever like, I never learned this. I'm like, yeah, you did. Like, it's literally like, and I know this because I literally wrote the book, man. I wrote it. Like, it's in there, I promise you. And you can send them a link, I can,
yeah.
So is there a certain software that you use, that you particularly like in terms of getting all your SOPs and documentation and everything, all housed?
Yeah, we use a platform called Insightly. Insightly's evolved over the years to be more of a sales pipeline, but the reason why we keep our task management there is because of one feature. So any of you guys listening that build out task management software, or if you already have one, add this one stupid ass feature and you'll have so many customers. And so the one thing that Insightly does that we cannot find that any other platform does is it makes groups of tasks modular. And so what I mean by that is, like, in Insightly, you have your tasks, which is the task, and then you assign a task to what they call an activity set, which is chunks of tasks, groups of tasks.
Okay.
And then you can assign activity sets to projects, which is like the whole flow of all the activity sets, which then contains all the tasks. So the problem with most other project management systems is when you need to go change the documentation, like, let's say we're working on a commerce website and then a non-commerce website. Well, they have some unique dependencies and fulfillment models, but they also have some that are the same. Like one of them might be, go submit this thing to Google. So then if we have to change that documentation, I have to go change it in this one and then change it in the other one. But in Sightly, I don't have to do that. And in Sightly, I can cross-reference entire tasks and activity sets to different pipelines and flows. So I need to change it in the one, and it's going to replicate across any variation possible. So just for the simplicity of consistent documentation and having that modularity and documentation, that's the sole reason we stay with Insightly.
We looked at them. They were one of the contenders. They're solid for sure. What have you found to be your favorite part of your whole kind of journey as of recently? Kind of looking back at everything, and when you kind of think about like, oh man, like I built this and I did this. Like, do you have like a grand kind of takeaway where you're kind of set right now?
Yeah, I think it's this moment right now, just being having the freedom to do conversations like this. You know, I've been really fortunate to find success, however you want to measure that, you know, whether it's financially or real estate, like all those on paper things, like I have those in check. And so that's not what brings you, like when you get to a certain level, like I'm not saying don't pursue those things, right? Because you don't understand the meaning of those until you have them on your own. But once you have those, it's true, like those aren't the things that make you happy. And in fact, those are the things that usually frustrate the shit out of you because it's like, okay, cool, I have a lake property. Well, great. Now I got these stupid ass jet skis that I have to winterize. And then in the summer, I got to unwinterize, and like just like little things. And then, or I have this property, this big property. Well, great. Well, now I got to deal with landscaping and somebody to mow the lawn. And like, it's like all these things that you acquire over time, you reach a tipping point where they become the thing that or the majority of your stress. And so for me, like it's been not looking at the numbers. You know, I continue to scale because it makes me happy to provide for my team. I continue to scale because I can do things like this and make an impact. Like it's the relationship things that I'm super proud of where I'm at now. And, you know, being able to have the freedom to, you know, I made a post this week about how took my kids to like a skateboarding camp. And so I just went and brought my laptop and hung out with them. And so while they're off skateboarding, I could watch and take pictures and bust out a little bit of work. And then in between their breaks, I could hang and go skate with them. And like having the freedom of time is by far the most valuable thing that I can put my finger on, for myself. And then for other people, it's just been being able to share some of these stories and experiences and hope that it helps out other people. And I get messages, like just totally random messages every other day about, hey, I read this one thing or saw this one podcast and this one webinar. And those little tokens of appreciation are really what keep me at it currently.
Yeah. Your mindset and the way that you kind of articulate your thoughts and kind of your thought processes and how they're laid out, it's really refreshing. You can definitely tell that you've found your kind of inner workflow, if you will. And it seems to work really, really well for you. So, the one other thing I want to touch on, you have a book too, right?
I do, yeah.
So like, I always ask people, hey, yo, look at that. I always ask people, like, what comes first? The idea to write a book or the idea for the book? Are you like, hey, I want to write a book. What should I write it about? Or are you like, oh my gosh, I have this great idea for a book?
For me, it was a little bit of an overlap. Probably more so, I should write a book, but it was I should write a book because I know I have some experience to offer in the world of SEO. But so even though I kind of knew I wanted it to be marketing focused, I didn't know the intricacies of where I wanted to take it. So it was mostly the first, but I didn't move on it till I figured out the latter. And so, because I didn't want just like another marketing book, I didn't want it to be just like a sales deck, like I'm a badass, buy our services. Because like you see a lot of these other people that publish books and they're really not books. Like when you look at it, it's just like this giant white paper. And so I wanted it to have actual value. And then I also wanted it to be somewhat future proof. I know it's not going to be evergreen forever, but I didn't want it. I wanted to communicate the thought processes that you could apply to marketing in the long term. You know, so I talk about the importance of relationships to scale a business. I talk about the importance of like authenticity in your content. And so like those parts are evergreen. So like the majority of the book hopefully will last, you know, a long time and still be applicable. So when I started writing it, the first phase was just like vomiting all the ideas and getting them out. Yeah. And then it's like, putting your ducks in a row. Like, I want to talk about this and this and this and this and this, but like, in what order did they go? And then when you figure out the order, then you can, write subsections of the chapter outlines, because like, I know for sure I can write about this, I know for sure I want to write about that, and then you just slowly piece it together. And then what was interesting for me, I mean, it took about 2 years to publish the book, because the first like 6, 7, 8 months was drafting it out, and then all of a sudden I got a 135 page book, and I'm like, holy shit, now I got to read 135 pages. So then it was like, I need to take a time out. So I paused for 2 or 3 months, and then I went back and read it. And so then I read the whole thing, and as you read it, you're like, oh, okay, well, this chapter 12 would be better as chapter 5. And you start moving around entire chapters. Well, then once you move around entire chapters, it's the same thing. It's like, well, crap, now I got to read 135 pages again.
Did you do this whole process by yourself?
For the most part, yeah, because I had a lady that helped with some of the outlines. She is who I vomited on. Like I said, these are all the things I want to talk about. And so she helped take that and kind of put the puzzle outline together. But I wanted to write it. Like, this isn't like, a fiction book where it's anybody can ghostwrite it. Like, this is very specifically based on my experience and my knowledge. And so I wanted it to be my voice. And then I also knew that I wanted to give it to people. And so, like, when I talk to leads, I give it to people. When I go on podcasts, I give it to people. And so I wanted to be something that I could freely gift to. And so with that being said, it's like, okay, I don't want like this boring ass book about marketing. And so where I started was some of the fun stories. I talk about the Bachelor story. I talk about this nightlife website that I started. I talk about this big car enthusiast, second car enthusiast website that I started that took off. And then I got a cease and desist letter from a former FTC attorney. Like, all these like fun things that are like entertaining, but all the while they're underscoring the value and the potential of marketing, and slowly transitioning in from telling these stories and these stories then becoming outlines, and the outlines becoming tangible tips that you can take away and actually implement, not just like some fluffy generalities.
Yeah, no, that's it just always blows my mind how people can take all their ideas and their wealth of knowledge and condense it into a book, and then being kind of like an entrepreneur, I feel like when you start a new task that it's never going to be as easy as you set out to be. So like you said, you're like, oh, so I was going to write a book, and then next 6 months later I got 135 pages, and now I have to like go through and critique, and it's just so overwhelming. It's such a process. Like, I always just think it's so amazing that when people do this.
What's funny is so when I had the final draft, so for me, I found it, so I would write it on the computer, but when I would proof it, I'd print it out. It was easier for me to mark it up in print.
You can see that.
And so at the time, there was this private mastermind up in Park City, and Seth Godin was there, and there was just like 100, I think there was like 100 people there. And I knew Seth was speaking next, and so while everyone else was cramming into this little room, I went and waited out in the hall. I'm like, he's got to get in here. He's got to walk to get into the room, so I'm going to wait out here. And so I caught Seth a couple minutes before he went on and talked, and got a picture with him. And I had my printout of my book, and I said, hey, would you mind signing this book? Like, I'm going to publish it soon. Here's my final draft. And he goes, you wrote it? And I said, yeah. And he goes, no, you sign it.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Oh man.
He ended up signing, his copies of books and stuff, but I thought that was funny. And then another thing that was funny is, as the assistant or stage manager, whoever it was, I said, hey, can you take a picture of us? And so while he's taking a picture, Seth goes, what's amazing about Utah is the guys all here have the most amazing beards. And so I was laughing about that. And then like later at the end of his speech, when he's doing Q&A, I had a question, so I raised my hand, and he goes, yes, the beard. So, like, there's videos on YouTube of him at this mastermind, and I'm not in frame, but you can see him pointing off, and he's all the beard, and I'm like, yeah, that's me.
That's freaking awesome, man. Well, cool. Hey, well, thank you so much for coming on today. I enjoyed hearing everything. It's like I said, it's really nice to hear your refreshing outlook on things and your process and whatnot. But one thing I want to do before we leave, I do this thing called Real Talk Rapid Fire. I'm going to shoot you like 15 questions. They're real easy. First thing comes to your mind. Don't think about it. Don't underthink it. Don't overthink it. All right?
All right, let's go.
All right, here we go. Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix.
Cats or dogs?
Neither.
Ugh.
We have 2 dogs,
Kids.
but I've had them for too long.
Do you like your pizza cut in triangles or squares?
Triangles.
Well,
What kind of animal likes squares?
oh, are you kidding me? It's the best way. What was your first car?
1987 Dodge Omni.
What was your first job?
Janitor to junior high when I was 16.
Nice. What is your favorite city in America?
San Diego.
Favorite band?
I don't have one. When I had a favorite, like when I clearly had a favorite, it was Nirvana. 20 years ago.
All right, fair enough. What's your favorite book?
Dude, I can't read books. I got to do the motivational books. The 4-Hour Workweek and E-Myth were probably had the most clear impact on business. The last fiction book I read was like junior high. It was called. It's funny because I was thinking about this the other day. It was called A Spell for Chameleon. It was some science fiction kind of.
All right. For all you readers out there, let us know if that's a good read. Microsoft or Apple?
I use Apple.
Are aliens real?
Oh, I'm open to the idea of it, yes.
All right, I like that answer. Last question. Will you come back in 100 episodes and check back in? Especially since you're in Utah, I'm in Vegas, so maybe we can do it in person next time.
1,000%.
Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. Well, hey, thank you again, Damon, so much for coming on. Again, give us the whole spiel about how anyone can contact you if they're curious about using your services, if they want to buy your book, if they want to check out your website. Give us the whole spiel, and we'll put it all in the description as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. So if you want to learn more about business, company is SEOnational.com. For the book, if you want to learn about SEO or if you just want some of those fun stories, you can either get a free copy. It's a free PDF copy at freeseobook.com. It's also available on Amazon and Audible if you want a print copy or the audio copy. The dude that narrated, his name's Tim Cicerelli, super cool guy. I'm really pleased with how the audio copy turned out. But freeseobook.com, there's no upsell on the thank you page, just invites you to our Facebook group. And then I am personally most active on LinkedIn and Facebook. So if you just search Damon Burton, you'll find me, and I post pretty consistently on there.
Well, awesome. Damon, thank you again so much. Everybody, if you're still listening, which I hope you are because you're listening, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the rate button, hit all the buttons except that one with the thumb down. But, guys, until next time, we are out of here. Again, Damon, thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mason.
All right, guys, we're out.
You've been listening to Real Talk with Mason. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. We hope you've had fun. We know we did, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Mason on Instagram at Real Talk with Mason. Walter Badgett once said, "The greatest pleasure in life is doing what people say you cannot do." And we tend to agree. Till next time.